Hi everyone, welcome back to the Velvet Lounge. We're getting down a little bit today with some music in the background. And I just want to say thank you to those that have looked at our videos and have learned several things from my button videos that I recently put out. This is the third I am shooting right now in this series. And yes, there will be, at this point, I can tell there'll be at least, I would say, 3 more, maybe 4 or 5, but definitely 3. And just to let you know, this is Juice by Lizzo in the background. I got this from YouTube Music, which is pretty cool. And we're going to start this video in just a second, but please remember, you can subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on any future videos. Also, if you can leave a comment or a question, if you have one, leave it below. And as I stated previously, in our About section, you can contact me. My email address is there. And that's where you can also send photographs if you have questions about the types of buttons that you have and you're trying to identify them. So what we have on the table, I'll minimize that a little bit, is a variety of buttons. And I am going to, just go through and describe what they are to you. We, as I stated previously, will be doing a separate video on the types of backs that buttons have. That makes a difference in the value. So knowing how to describe the backs of your buttons, if you're creating a listing on Facebook or eBay or wherever at Etsy, is very important. And it's also one of the reasons why sometimes you're not selling them for enough. So let's just get started right in here. I didn't put any lotion on my hands. I think I'll do that because I don't think you want to see my ashy little fingers. But my dog is in here with me, Maya. And she's being my little director today. So, just looking at the table, I have a variety of buttons that are made out of various materials. I'm going to, in my next video, show you several buttons in my Czechoslovakian button collection. In this collection, can you guess right now which of these buttons are Czechoslovakian? If any. Give you 2 seconds, 1 and 2, and which ones did you guess? If you guess the red rectangular ones, you are correct. These were made in Czechoslovakia around 1920, 1930. This is at a time, once again, war impacted the button industry a lot. A lot of people don't know that. You'll hear me reference it several times in these videos. But the reason that it impacted the industry is they had to start using a different medium for making buttons. And one of those medium were glass. So all of these are made of glass. The color is described as ruby red. So it's this beautiful red jeweled color. All of these are bezeled around the edges. You can see that. I'll move that one a little more. Bam, bam, bam. You can see it. And have these beautiful backs on them. Let's turn over the bottom too. And also, a huge way to tell you have a quality button is, they're thick. These are thick buttons. These are not little flimsy buttons. So, and also the size, especially to be this shape, is pretty ample, to be a rectangular button. And you know how I like to measure sometimes, so I am definitely going to measure these for you if I don't get murdered by the tape measure. So I'll start at the 2. These measure around, wow, about 5/8 of an inch. So nice buttons, good size, I can't even describe to you how many things you could do with these besides put them on clothing. So the next buttons, I'm actually going to pick up 2 sets of buttons because they're by the same company. They're still on their cards. These are, as you can tell, by La Mode. La Mode made a lot of buttons in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. The cats are from the 70s. The apples are from the 80s. And ironically, look at the difference in price. And I think that's simply because like these are transfer buttons, and both of them are made of plastic. And, you know, they're simply sewn on the card. And of course, it's a choice of smart women for more than 100 years. So these were made in Japan. They were made in America initially. But obviously, just like a lot of other manufacturing in the United States, when people did not want to do the work, it had to go overseas and it was more cost effective. So these were made in Japan, so that could tell you right there. That also dates them because I think right now at this moment, the Mode buttons are made in China. So, you know, you can date buttons as well, especially if you have the cards by where they were created. And pick up another set of buttons that are on a card. These are unusual value fashion buttons. I just think it's funny. It's like there wasn't a lot of effort in like creating a name, but anyway, I do like this card because these are from the mid-century modern era. Even has a little starburst there, which is pretty cool. And these buttons are made of metal as well as the acrylic, which aka Lucite. So the bow in the middle is metal as well as the bottom that they're attached to. Of course, I'm not taking these off the card. This is what the back looks like. These are pretty cool fashion buttons. Once again, you know, you look at these, you're like, wow, there's a lot of things I could do with those. And we will have a video on that, on, you know, different crafts and things that people do to create, you know, things with buttons. Next, I have another set of buttons that are acrylic, aka by Lucite, as well as these have, I don't know if you can see it really well, but they have these metal inserts, and it's actually a double metal insert. You have the larger circle, and then you have the floral with a black background on top. All of that is made of metal and inset into the Lucite. These I like a lot simply because you know how I am. I always respect the work that that goes into something that's kind of different that someone created. I'm assuming that these were probably machine made because they could sort of punch all the parts together. You can see what the back looks like. It's a nice big loop. You can get, you know, thick cordage through that. Obviously, thread, which is what they initially had going through them. My assumption is that these probably came off of a coat. I don't know if I showed you this button before, but just in case I am showing it to you again. This button is pretty cool. It initially probably started out as like a clear color, whereas over time this button has yellowed simply from probably being washed as well as the age of it. This is really old plastic, and the cool thing about this is it's pierced, so a pierced plastic button with a bubble back. You can see how it bubbles over, and you can see where the thread would be attached to that. And I just like this button a lot. And of course, like if you're wearing something and let's say that it has a blue background to it, then that color, you know, the color of whatever you're wearing will come through, which is why people like the pierced buttons. I like the pierced ones as well because of that feature. So there you go, that's that one. And great textures on that too. This is a button that we've had quite a bit of interest in. This is from the Art Deco period. I mean, look at it. It screams Deco, 1920s. This is another Czechoslovakian button. So, haha, tricked you. There were two on the table. And this one has, it's made of glass as well. And you can see it sort of like goes in. And then the attachment for the thread stands up above that, and I just like that because it lays on the clothing so nice, so like beautifully. This glass button also has, as you can see, the silver. So this one has been silvered with a metal type substance. I do not believe it's sterling silver, and it's really just painted on the texture of the button to sort of give it a rhinestone look. So I thought that was pretty cool. You can actually, you know, how you want to sew this on your clothing, or if you're making something else out of it, obviously it would be up to the maker, but they could do quite a bit with this button as a feature item. So really pretty. Next, we have buttons that I've had since I was a child, or very, very young. We have the moose buttons, and these moose buttons are just really cool. They just have so much character. Actually, I'll turn one over for you. And one of the features about these, especially, I don't know if you can really see it. Let me get a pointer for you. This one, you can see it pretty well. Underneath the silvering, there's copper. So these buttons actually are copper underneath, and then there's a silver metal that was poured over the top. And I just love the way the moose pops out, and you can see it on this one as well. You can see it here and there, and I think that actually just adds even more to the character, but it also helps you sort of date the age, you know, so you know these are not brand new buttons. And then you can see what the backs look like with a nice hole so that you can put your thread through there, or cordage. So once again, there's a lot you could do with, you know, copper buttons with a silver metal overlay. And look at the detail, you know, as far as the fur of the moose. The rack is overly, like, it's crazy. It's so huge. You could just imagine that would be a massive animal. I have a Bakelite button here. So this is a very cool, I think it's sextagon design, but it's also like cut like at an angle on the left and the right sides. I just like that detail. It sort of reminds me of candy, like a butterscotch candy. So, and the hole on this surprisingly isn't as large as you would expect. And for the original Bakelite buttons, that's just how they were. They were, you know, made large and chunky and colorful, you know, just to have that punch of color on for an outfit that might be a little less expensive. But at the end of the day, a lot of these buttons did survive the test of time simply because of the design and the colors. So this is definitely one of the classic butterscotch Bakelite colors, and it's not really as butterscotchy as it is yellow, but you could see within where the buttonhole is, it's, you know, it has some of that butterscotch tint to it. So super fun button, great feature for, you know, a project. Actually, I'm going to do these next. These are, so remember the other day I was talking about Kaleidoscope buttons. So here, this is a perfect example of a Kaleidoscope button. So the cool thing about these, not only are they kaleidoscope, but they're square, like a graduated square. You could see the colors and colorant are actually put at the bottom of these Lucite buttons. And when you look at them, it sort of gives you the illusion of a kaleidoscope. So clever idea. Love the fact that the back of these buttons are as they are, because you could, once again, do so much with a pair of earrings. I'm sorry, yes, there's a clue. You can turn these into earrings, but you could do so much with a pair of buttons like this. They're just gorgeous. They're perfect. These are pretty old buttons, and they still look crystal, like so beautiful. So I have a lot of buttons. Let me just look at this. That are railroad uniforms of every type, from police officers to security officers to military, etc. And I just wanted to show you this one. It's the Lackawanna Railroad, which is what the RR stands for. That's somewhere, it used to be somewhere in New York. Obviously, lots of railroads are defunct because we basically only have Amtrak. So this would have, predated Amtrak by a mile. And on the back, which is one of the cool things when you find buttons like this, you get more information because, whether it be the patent information, and sometimes these are called patent buttons, P-A-T-E-N, or it could also be, telling you what company made them, etc., etc. There's always usually information on the back of these buttons. So always turn them over, get that additional information. This is a small button. It's probably, yeah, I would say this is about the size of a dime. So for a button for uniform, pretty small. This probably would have been something to accent the uniform, like on the shoulder or pocket, versus being down the middle of, the jacket or shirt, because obviously it's not large enough, really. So that's a great piece for someone who not only collects buttons, but, it's a cross collectible for those that like railroad memorabilia or transportation memorabilia. So that's another thing when you're collecting buttons. Always think to yourselves, for example, the set that I had with the cats that I showed you, someone, if I listed that, I would make sure that the word cat was in, or feline, or both words were in my description. So let's see if I can put all these in my hand, because these are a little bit bigger. Actually, I'll flip one over. So there we go. So very interesting buttons. I do have to do more research on these. I got these not long ago, but look at all that detail. Like, that's pretty amazing. I have a feeling that these are for golf, or maybe because I believe there's a thistle on them, so they could be Scottish as well. I think this is the thistle, and obviously those look like golf clubs that are crossed over. There's a crown in the center, and there is like wording, numbers, whatever, around the perimeter of each button. So these, like I said, I just got a short time ago, so I haven't, completed research on them, but I might bring these back out just to show you, or tell you what I found because I will do like a wrap-up conclusion video at the very, very end of the series. And if you have any questions, or if you have any knowledge, please share it with us down there in the comments. We'd appreciate that. One of the other things I thought was really unusual about these buttons is, I just want to show you that they're not damaged. All four of them have like, where you would attach the thread, it like sinks in. But if I flip it over, I don't know if I can catch it with my fingernail quick enough. Let's see, I'll try one more time. So you can see You know, they're not permanently, where the thread goes, it's not permanently sunk in. But when they relax, you know, all of the thread holders like sink back in. So I've never really experienced that with this type of button before, so I can't wait until I find out more information on them. Hopefully I'll be able to find a maker, but these are very like the detail is just absolutely fabulous. These are made of metal, so they're metal backs, they're metal fronts. So more buttons for my metal button collection. I just want to pull this forward for you because we're almost finished. Oh my God, this confetti lucite button is amazing. Why? One, the sheer size of it. It's a large button as well. And usually buttons of this style usually are not this large. So it's an inch and almost 2 inches in diameter, like an inch, and it's over an eighth. Then it has a confetti center. So when you see this design, you know that you have a what they call a confetti button. And like this one, and usually when you find confetti buttons, they're only confetti. This, they went even further by adding the lucite. And then look at that backing. Awesome. And what a clean button. Just so amazing. This is something that came from the 1960s. I actually know which piece of clothing I recovered it from. It was a coat, and just, I mean, this button is amazing. I always, when I was a child, would look at this button and think, oh my God, it's like candy. But obviously it's not candy. But beautiful button, lots that you could do with something like this. I actually sewed these on a card because I had someone who was interested in them. And whenever I am presenting buttons to someone, I always put them on a card because, you know, it just looks better. And also they already had pictures of what they look like off the card. So these are pierced lucite, or I don't even know if these are lucite. They're similar to the plastic that is in this button. You can see the similarities, and they actually came out of the same lot. The difference is these have a metal front, so these seem to be about 1920s. They seem to be older than the other button. And just the design and the fact that, you know, more care was put into making these. And the metal actually goes all the way to the back where the thread would go through. Just in the buttons, these measure about an inch and 3/8. So not a small button, you know, two pretty decent sized buttons as well. Okay, I'm going to pick all of these up at one time. And I will keep at least one reversed. There you go. I think that's good. So these are so tasty. They're made of glass as well, but they're reverse painted glass buttons. So what they did is they textured the back of the button so when it was poured into the glass mold, this is all like indented, textured to look like a star. And then what they did is they went in with black and gold paint and painted them in, you know, but on the reverse side. Now, the reason that some buttons were reverse painted, it totally makes sense when you think about it. When you wash these, it was, you know, it took less time for the colorant to, or the paint to wash off. If these were turned around, if this was turned around and this side was bubbled and the paint was added to the top, the paint will wash off really fast. These were never used. I did chip this one a little bit, but you know, great set of buttons. You could, once again, there's a lot you could do with these. it was amazing that, you know, the forethought that was simply put into making something as simple and utilitarian as a button. But, you know, artisans back then, manufacturers, you know, they really cared about the quality of the work that they put out there. So, beautiful set of buttons. These are some sweet little buttons, and I do mean sweet. I can imagine these on a house dress, or back in the day they would call them housecoats. I can totally imagine that. These pretty buttons, they have, you can't really see it as well, but they have a pink hue to them, and the tops are, as you can see, scalloped around the circumference of them. And you know, these are like probably 1940s. You know, like I said, I can imagine them for a house coat. And this is what the back looks like, which kind of rounds downward. You have a flat front and the scalloping around the edges. So, beautiful set of buttons. These are made of that pearlized plastic. We talked about pearlized buttons before. So this is a good example of what, you know, when they pearlize something to try to make it look like an actual pearl. There you go. And then let's end, now my table looks messy. Let's end with a pearl button. This is a large pearl button. It's been carved out, and this would have been done by hand. I love the size of the buttonhole. So this is a 4-hole button. Love the size of those holes because you can get thread through that, cordage through that, you know, wiring, etc. This is the back. And as you know, I mean, these were carved out of shells. So a button this size would have been carved out of a really pretty large shell. I'm going to say this is probably 1.25 inches in diameter. And it is 1 inch and almost 1.5 inches actually in diameter. So really big button. I imagine that this once again would have been on a coat or maybe a cloak or cape right in the center of one's throat. Absolute, or maybe even something super bold on a cuff of a coat. But beautiful button, nicely carved. And I just want to thank you guys for tuning in again to the Velvet Lounge and watching our button series. Please, if you have any questions, you know, leave them down below. Send us an email. The next video will be coming out every week. So every week you'll get a video. And in between those, you might see some of my other videos on what I sold on eBay or Facebook or whatever, or talking about other projects and things that we're involved in. So thank you so much. Have a good evening and keep collecting.